Next topic, progressive overload. Remember, I told you there's 4 things we're going to be talking about today. Progressive overload. Progressive overload is actually a biological adaptation. It's involved in all sorts of aspects of biology. If I walk out into the sun is the stimulus, it beats down on my skin. My body says, what is this? It detects it and it says, oh, there's stimulus, or oh, there's a threat. I need an adaptation to the stimulus. And you see it, people's skin get darker as a result of exposure to the sun. But if you were to give yourself the same amount of exposure to the sun, you would not continually get darker. You would just maintain that level of darkness. In order to go to the next level of darkness, you need more stimulus, meaning more time under the sun for over a period of time in order to continue to get darker. Let me put it in another term for you. You wake up and, I don't know, you're 20-something years old, you're going to college, and you discovered caffeine. So now you're a coffee drinker. And you go and you get your small coffee from whatever coffee shop you go to, and your body's like, ooh, what's this? And your body has a reaction to the stimulus. It has an adaptation from the stimulus. This is progressive overload. Your body has an adaptation to the coffee. Well, after about 3 weeks, that small coffee that you're now having every single day, your body will habituate to it. So in order to keep getting caffeinated to a new extent, you are going to need more caffeine. So now, instead of a small coffee, you're having a medium coffee. Instead of a medium coffee, you're having a large coffee, and then you go into, and then over the series of like 6 months, now you're having 2 large coffees a day with an extra shot of espresso in each and every single one of them. And in the same way, whereas once upon a time, this was enough for adaptation, and then I was doing 10-pound curls, then I'm doing 20-pound curls, and now I'm doing 30-pound curls and 40-pound curls. You understand my point. A progressive overload is required alongside mechanical tension in order to continue to build muscle. I understand that you probably don't want to be a champion powerlifter. I understand that you probably aren't looking to compete as a bodybuilder, probably not if you're following me. But what you probably are wanting to do is to feel better in and out of your clothing. And the steps that are required to do that, again, are pretty drastic. You are going to have to get stronger in order to cause adaptation in your muscles. And again, you're never going to end up, it's not like gamma radiation, like, oh, I'm an everyday person. I work a 9 to 5 as a finance guy, and I started lifting weights, and oh, I'm the Hulk. It's not going to happen that way. And I think most people are aware of it at this point. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. You're going to have to train your chest 100 times this year in order to put 2 pounds, a pound of muscle on your chest. I mean, it's an exhaustive amount of work. And the people who are always the most successful at it for that reason are the people like me who enjoy it the most. The reason I'm this jacked, when somebody says to me, "What, dude, you look phenomenal," when I'm in a gym locker room, I'll say to them, well, first of all, this is my career, and second of all, it's my passion. I love it. If that's not the case, if you just are simply doing this because you want to get more attention, good luck. But if you're really committed about your health and you really want to look better, you can do it. It's just going to take you a lot of work, and you're going to have to work smart, which is mechanical tension, and then you're also going to have to work smart and hard, which is progressive overload. So essentially, we've talked about the scientific basis for this. Let's talk about what it actually looks like. What it actually looks like is tracking, which is again why I use an app. And let's take an exercise as an example. I want to train my legs. I'm training my legs that day. My first exercise that I use is the leg press. And let's say that I use 90 pounds on the leg press. That's a 45 on each side of the leg press. And I get 10 repetitions with this, right? 3 times 10 with 90 pounds. That's great. And I can do that. And I will build muscle by doing that. However, just like the small coffee, over time, this 90 pounds needs to become more. And I think most of us understand that, of what I'm talking about. But what you do need to understand is 90 pounds doesn't need to go to 140 pounds right away. So for example, you don't need to go from having 245 or a 45 on each side of the sled to having a 45 and a 25 the next week in order to build muscle. Instead, what you need to do is we said 3 times 10. So the first week, let's write this out. Week 1, 90 pounds, which is what I do on the app. I have people track. 3 times 10. Well, you know what a form of progressive overload is? Week 2, 90 pounds, 3 times 12. That's progressive overload. Taking the same weight and just getting a couple extra reps on each set. The challenge in here is, as you get those additional reps, you don't want to forget the circle rep theory, which means if you're trying to get a couple extra reps, you don't want to start using less range of motion in order to get those couple range. You don't want to compromise on your form. You want to keep 100% of the repetition, but instead of now doing 10 reps with 100% mechanical tension, we now want to do 12 reps with 100% mechanical tension. And then on week 3, we do 90 pounds, 3 times 14. And you can see how very quickly this adds up by just simply adding a single rep. And you could add a single rep to your lateral raise, you could add a single rep to your bicep, and this is a form of progressive overload, that you've got more repetitions on the same amount of weight that you did the previous week. What you could also do is continue to do 3 sets of 10. So adding repetitions is one way of doing this. Another very obvious way of doing this is adding some weight. And it does, again, not have to be drastic. So in this example, first week I did 90 pounds. Next week I did 95 pounds. I mean, how easy is it to add 2.5 plates to both sides on a leg press? Anybody can do that. It's very, very easy to do. And then the next week, instead I took off the 2.5 pounds, and now I added 5 pounds on each side of the leg press. So I have a 45 and a 5 on each side of the leg press. My point is even if you go up in 5-pound increments on a barbell, that is a form of progressive overload. And that is literally all I do. I just go to the gym and I say, okay, last week on the leg press, I got this many reps for this many sets. This week, I'm gonna do the same amount of sets, but I'm gonna get 1 rep more, or I'm gonna lift 5 pounds more. And I make sure that I adequately challenge myself through it. This is what progressive overload is. It's either increasing repetitions and making sure that those repetitions are a complete circle, that I'm not compromising my form while I'm adding repetitions, or I'm increasing what we refer to in the scientific community as load. Be mature, but we refer to it as load. And load just simply refers to the amount of weight that you're lifting, because load's an easier way to doing it, because it could be dumbbells, it could be selectorized stack on a plate, it could be any sort of mechanism to just increase the overall weight of the object. So they refer to it as load. I think it's a more appropriate term as well. The other thing that can happen here is, for example, let's say I do week 1, week 2, week 3, because you can do both of these things. And let's say week 4 comes around and I do my warm-up sets and I put 100 pounds on there, or I do my warm-up sets and I'm getting ready to do the 100 pounds, and I just don't feel that strong today. And I don't feel confident that I can go to 105 pounds today for whatever reason. And so what I do is, week 3, I got 3 times 10 with 100 pounds, and then I could do 3 times 11 with 100 pounds. And what I mean by that is simply, you can simply sometimes increase the weight or sometimes increase the repetitions. Like a strategy I do a lot of times is, somebody's doing, for example, lateral raises. Because if you go from 5 to 10s, that's 100% increase in weight. So they're doing lateral raises and they can get 10 with 5 pounds. 10 repetitions on a lateral raise with 5 pounds. But they're not ready to make the jump to 10 pounds yet. It's too drastic. Remember, it's 100% increase in weight. So what I'll do is, I'll have them get 11 reps. The next week, 12 reps, and they get 13. And when we get to around 15 repetitions, then I'll jump them to 10 pounds. And then we'll bust out 10 pounds. And then when we're getting to around 15 repetitions, again, week after week, going up in a repetition, I will then move them to the 15-pound dumbbell. So you can play with both reps and load interchangeably. I want to talk about that's really what progressive overload is, and it's the essential part to building muscle in the gym. So these are the two main ways that we progressive overload our lifts. The other thing that you can do is making something mechanically more difficult. Now, I don't really advise this. I would really primarily do those first two, but in certain circumstances, it makes sense. An example of making something more mechanically difficult is if you're doing the leg press and you put the pad underneath you, and now you're able to wedge yourself in more tightly so that your glutes don't lift up as you're doing the leg press. That mechanically makes the exercise more challenging. Perhaps you're doing the leg press and now you put a yoga block in between your legs. That will make it mechanically more challenging. So in general, I would stick to repetition or load rather than relying on mechanical tension. I want to give you a few examples of what progressive overload is not. One of those things is thinking mechanical tension is doing a traditional push-up and now you switch to a decline push-up. The reason that this is not an increase in mechanical tension is they're two fucking different exercises. They're not apples to apples. One works primarily your pec minor with some pec major. The other primarily works your pec major with some pec minor. They are not apples to apples. That is not an example of progressive overload. Decreasing your rest breaks between sets, that makes the exercise more difficult because you have less time to recover. It's not an example of progressive overload. In fact, when you take shorter rest breaks, it actually makes each set you're doing less efficient. You do not want to decrease your rest breaks. You want somewhere between 90 seconds and 3 minutes between sets in order to optimally build muscle. Another example that is not progressive overload, that's tough to think about, but say we're doing 3 sets times 10. If I increase this, say on week 4 here, if I increase it to 4 sets instead of 3 sets, that's not progressive overload. That's something different. You're increasing the amount of volume that you're doing, which we'll talk about later. It's not a bad thing. It might be a valid strategy. You might need more volume in order to build your muscles, but it's not a form of progressive overload. The major ways that you will progressively overload is through either repetition or load. Guys, thanks for tuning in for this portion of my series, How to Build Muscle in the Gym. Stay tuned because we're going to be releasing the next portion of the series in the coming days. We have a 4-part series that's all about how to build muscle in the gym. If you like what you saw today, please hit subscribe. I release at least one long format piece of content each and every single day. If you're not following me on Instagram, that's where the majority of my following is. Thanks for tuning in. I really enjoy shooting YouTube.